Australia's Business Channel.
Welcome back to Business View. I'm Helen Daly. And I'm joined by, on the show this week by private investor and former fund manager Peter Morgan, who's with us, Chris Russell, who's the business editor at The Advertiser in our Adelaide studio, and a warm welcome to Professor Geoffrey Garrett, who's the Dean of the University of Sydney Business School, and he's also with the US Studies Centre, who joins us from our CBD studio. Professor Garrett, nice to have you with us.
Hi, Helen.
Hi there. And if I can start with you first, we were talking earlier about the US Federal Reserve decision, which of course has been, you know, the big business news all night. But from your point of view, looking at it from an American perspective, I mean, is there an issue at this early stage about Bernanke doing this less than 2 months before the presidential election?
Well, it's the right question, isn't it, Helen? You know, it looks like it's a gift for Barack Obama. But I think what Ben Bernanke is doing as the head of an independent Fed is following his dual mandate, taking his dual mandate very seriously. You know, a lot of central banks have to worry about inflation. The US Federal Reserve must also worry about employment. And what Bernanke is saying is, in the current environment, he thinks more monetary stimulus is essential for the US. And what I'd say about that editorial is it really is support for the Obama fiscal position, which says, yes, debt and deficit are important, but now's not the time to cut them. And also, you know, if we look internationally, the US is just looking in such a different place from Europe, where monetary looseness in Europe must be accompanied by fiscal tightness. We don't have that in the US.
Yeah. So how would you say it's being received in the United States? I mean, we know how the markets have received it. How do you think it's being received?
Well, as a political matter, no surprise, the Romney camp wanted to come out and say that it was a vote of no confidence in Obama by the Fed. You know, essentially,
that's right.
Obama's fiscal policy hasn't worked. We'll have to do more. But I think if you look at what Ben Bernanke said last week at the Jackson Hole conference, where, you know, he was giving really an intellectual rationale for the Fed's position, he was saying that we will buy US Treasury debt because we think the US is running a large deficit and running up a lot of public debt at the moment is the right response to the crisis because the US economy still hasn't recovered.
It is interesting that Mitt Romney did make some comments, and he not only did he say it wouldn't work and that Ben Bernanke's wrong and he didn't think it would create jobs, and there may be different views. We've had a view from Peter Morgan saying he's sceptical about whether it will produce jobs. But he went on to say that it shows that President Obama is wrong because Ben Bernanke was saying, no, the economy's not working well, and Mitt Romney said that President Obama's been telling the American people that it is going okay.
Yeah, so, you know, on the one hand, on the other hand. On the one hand, even Bernanke, you know, Bernanke's forward assessments on the unemployment rate are not very optimistic. You know, the Fed isn't thinking that US unemployment is going to get down in the 6 to 7% range for at least a couple of years. So that's saying on the one hand, yes, the US growth recovery and the stock market recovery just hasn't been strong enough to move the dial on jobs, and we could talk about why that's the case. But by the same token, I would just contrast the US Federal Reserve's action with the way the ECB operates in Europe. The ECB says to the southern European countries, we will only buy your debt if you give us a clear deficit and debt reduction package today. Contrast that with what Bernanke has done, which is to say we'll continue to buy US government debt and to prop up the housing debt and other things, even if the Obama administration keeps on its current trajectory, which is to say, yes, we take debt and deficits seriously, but not today. Today we've got to keep as much stimulus in the economy as we can.
I know, but which are you saying is more fiscally responsible? I mean, people in Europe have been saying they've got to put some kind of clear limits, I guess, on these countries. Otherwise, they'll just keep getting used to stimulus from the central bank.
Well, of course, but let's not look at, you know, Greece and Spain. Let's look at the UK, which is not in the Eurozone, not subject to the ECB. The UK has gone with serious fiscal austerity and fiscal contraction, and it just doesn't seem to be working in the UK. You know, they had a choice. The choice they made was austerity, and austerity doesn't seem to have worked. You go to the US, and you know, the US economic outlook, I continue to think, is probably better than the UK one. How much of that is to do with the Obama stimulus, I don't know. But the other thing we've got to remember about the US is that the world, not only the Federal Reserve, still is willing to lend the US lots and lots and lots of money. So if the US government can borrow on 10-year notes at under 2%, that still looks like not only a smart thing for the US government to do, but the world economy is saying, we'll support your doing that.
Peter, do you have a view on this?
Oh, well, I think, I mean, when one looks around the world today, there is still a lot of risk, and there's still political risk. I still can't see how Europe gets itself back on the straight and narrow quickly, let alone over the longer term. We've got, as I said, political risk not only in Europe but also in the US. You know, I'm a little bit on both sides. If Romney does get in, and it's a possibility, you know, what it actually means if he gets rid of Bernanke.
Well, that's right. In fact, can I just come back to Geoff Garrett on that? Geoff, because one of the things that Mitt Romney also made clear in an interview in the last 24 hours, that he will replace Ben Bernanke if he wins office. What impact would that have?
Well, of course, I mean, it would have the instability impact because everyone's still very nervous, so uncertainty is a very bad thing. There are probably a lot of people in the US who could be good central bankers. Remember, Ben Bernanke wasn't coming out of the market, he wasn't coming out of central bank, he was coming out of the Princeton economics department. And you know, pretty quickly he's obviously established his credentials. So yes, there'd be short-term uncertainty, but if I'm thinking about real political induced risk, I'd actually look for the period between the US presidential election and the inauguration of the next president, you know, this lame duck session of Congress. And for me, the dire scenario that I don't think will play out, but that at least is a possibility we should consider, is that if the Republicans win, if Romney wins, essentially they would read the election as a vindication of the Paul Ryan small government strategy, where the Tea Party at the moment is saying we want the US to go off a fiscal cliff. We want to trigger massive spending cuts. We want